basically, what are we going to talk about? What are the challenges we face during aging? What can happen? What could be wrong that we don't want to happen during aging? The first thing is premature aging. So premature oxidation. So that's completely related to oxidation. Premature aging is usually going with browning and the loss of color, but also loss of structure, loss of balance, loss of freshness, and the apparition of this honey, dry flower, cooked fruit, nutty character in the wine. So that could be something wanted in a longer term and a long aging, but usually you don't really want to have this early on. This can also happen very quickly in some wine that you have to delay the bottling. So if you do have to delay the bottling date because of some logistic situation, which we had a lot this year with bottles, for example, you want to make sure the wine is having the quality that you were planning on for the bottling. So that can happen in the tank, and we will talk about this. Second thing that can happen during aging is microbial contamination. So if there is a contamination in terms of microbes in the wine, we're going to lose color, we lose balance, but then we get some microbial aftertaste, such as mouthiness that can happen. And then VA, ethyl acetate, and all the other off aromas can be present with microbial contamination. So basically, if one of these two things or both of them happen, we commonly lose identity, freshness, harmony, balance, and we lose overall quality. So only two big topics to focus on: oxidation and microbial contamination. That's all we want to protect. We want to protect our wine during aging from these two challenges. So let's start with the first one, preventing premature aging. Okay, so premature aging is related to oxidation. There is two types of oxidation in wine, the chemical oxidation and the microbial oxidation, which mostly is made by acetobacter. We'll talk about the microbes later. So let's focus on chemical oxidation. Here is what happened in wine. This is how we summarize chemical reaction, oxidation reactions in wine. It's actually a much more complex reaction, which are chains of reaction, but this explains a pretty good picture. So we do have an oxygen that will get activated into a radical, the hydroxyperoxyl radical. This radical can oxidize phenolic compounds. So it's gonna oxidize phenolic compounds into a quinone, which is the molecule you see here. This quinone is gonna react first with glutathione. Glutathione is the natural antioxidant molecule of present in wine. So it's actually present in grapes, and then in wine. We unfortunately lose most of it during the process, but we still have some, and you will see there is a way to increase it. So glutathione is gonna act as a trap of the quinone and produce a grape reaction product, the GRP. Then the quinone can react with phenolic compounds. When this happens, usually it leads to browning and loss of color and loss of structure. We lose the phenolic compounds. And then quinone can react with some aromas, losing the fresh aromas and having more of the honey, dry fruit and dry nuts. Okay, so that's the first step of the oxidation process. But then we also have the formation of H2O2 that can be activated into a radical again via redox reaction into hydroxyl radical. That's a Fenton reaction, by the way. This hydroxyl radical is actually a very dangerous radical because it's not selective. Here you see it's oxidizing ethanol into acetaldehyde. That's one thing that can happen, but hydroxyl radical can oxidize everything that cross its way. And that's how we kind of lose control of the oxidation reaction, and we have this loop that happens that we can't really catch up. So how do we do to control? Doesn't mean we don't want any reaction to happen. We just want to have a control of it. So to have it slow and in a regular way, and so we can know where our wine is going. First step manage temperature of your cellar and temperature of your wine. Colder will have the reaction slower. So that's a first thing that can be interesting. But then we want to reduce dissolved oxygen. So be very good in the cellar. Make sure you are extremely careful in any movement with dissolved oxygen. The second step can be to remove phenolic compound precursors of oxidation. So phenolic compounds, but also any molecule that will increase the redox reaction. So iron or copper can be elements that are really participating to the redox reactions and activation of oxygen in radical. This will be via fining. Second step, we catch the radicals. The third step, sorry, we catch the radical before the radical catch our wine compounds. So we scavenge radicals with sulfur or with some tannins before the radicals catch our own tannins or other compounds. And then the last step we can do is to enhance our natural antioxidant protection by working on glutathione levels in wine. Okay, so we're gonna look at all these steps right now and the solution that you can have that apply to wine. So the first step, limit dissolved oxygen during the winemaking. That's a very good cellar practices. So use inert gas when you do any transfer, top regularly, limit movement, use qualitative pump and be extremely careful when you pump wine from one place to the other. Some pumps dissolve much more oxygen than some others. And then measure your DO all the time, all the way, so you can actually understand where you pick up oxygen. If we look at the different action in the cellar and which one dissolve the most oxygen, that's interesting to understand where to be more careful. Obviously, if we are not careful, every single action can dissolve a lot of oxygen. But in general, the action that is the most dangerous and the most impacting is a cold stabilization made by cold. So using cold for tartrate stabilization is actually going to increase the solubility of oxygen. So we are dissolving a lot of oxygen in wine. Then we stop all the reactions because we are cold. So that's fine, but we are accumulating a lot of dissolved oxygen into the wine. Then this one is going to be racked cold and we are going to warm it up before bottling. Once we warm it up, that's where all this dissolved oxygen get consumed. And a few months after, that's where you have what we call bottle shock, which often is actually just linked to a big shot of oxygen that the wine got coming out of cold stabilization. So talking qualitative and maintaining freshness and quality, limiting the risk of oxidation, thinking about an alternative to cold for tartrate stabilization is a very important point. So you have options. You have CMC, which La Motabie offers the Vino Protect. CMC is great for whites and rosé. You just have some requirement in terms of protein stability. Then you have manoprotein. We offer STAP K. Manoprotein is actually used in every wine, so white, rosé, red, sparkling too. And manoprotein is not going to react with other proteins, so there is no interaction with protein stability, so you don't have to be as strict with protein stability. And manoprotein or STAP K is going to give you a little bit of roundness and volume, especially in the mid palate. Okay, that's two options that you have here. And the last one is potassium polyaspartate, which is a newer molecule on the wine industry. Using an alternative to cold is not only good for quality, but you actually save labor and time because this is really just one addition. It takes a few minutes. You save volume because you are adding a product and not subtracting. You save a lot of labor, but also a lot of energy because it's much more sustainable to use these alternatives that doesn't require any cold. Okay, I will do another webinar coming. Next one that will come up will be on wine stability. So I will focus more on this in another webinar. But then if you have questions, feel free to ask me the question after the presentation. The last point in terms of dissolved oxygen is ready to control the bottling. So you can see bottling is still a big participation of the dissolved oxygen. So use inert gas and be careful with the bottling line you are using. And the choice of closure. The choice of closure is essential to control your shelf life. That's what really is a big part of how long your wine is going to resist and how much oxygen are going through the bottle during aging. So there is a lot of technical closure these days that are available to you. Just speak to your supplier. Okay, so next point here was to talk about achieving oxidative stability via fining. So fining is a very essential step. It's a multitask step. We usually recommend to do fining in must and juice or must during fermentation, but it's never too late. Even on wine, we can do fining. We just are a little bit more careful with dosage. When you do fining in whites and rosé, here I'm mostly focusing on whites and rosé, it helps you to eliminate unstable phenolic compounds. So removing the precursors of oxidation, this leading to a much more stable wine because there is not much to oxidize anymore. It also improves clarification. It's going to improve aromatic expression by removing of aromas, but also by removing these unstable phenolic compounds, so stabilizing the wine. You can improve color, as you can see here in the picture. There is a different palette of color depending which fining agent we use. And some fining agents will help you achieving more stable wines, especially protein stability. Today, I'm focusing on polymix nature. Polymix nature is a blend of PVPP, yeast extract, and calcium bentonite. So it's a very good clarification agent that also eliminates unstable phenolic compounds. So polymix nature is highly recommended to remove browning, to remove any yellow nuance. As you can see in the picture here, we ended up with a wine that has less browning, but still a pretty good pink color. It is a vegan allergen-free fining agent, and it's gonna stabilize your wine in a longer term. You can see this trial on the screen here. We did the treatment during fermentation. So we added polymix nature during fermentation, and these are the aromatic analyses 2 months after fermentation. You can see first graph is about the esters compounds, second graph is about the thiolic compounds. On both situations, the polymix nature is having way more aromas than the control. That's not because we added aromas, that's just because we protected this aroma by removing the unstable phenolic compound. So we actually made the wine more resistant to oxidation and more stable through time. Very important step, removing oxidation precursors with fining. Next step is about scavenging oxygen radicals. Here on the graph, on the screen, you have a graph that is a study made by Vigneault in 2018, where they looked at different tannins and their ability to consume oxygen, how quickly they consume oxygen. We know tannins are good oxygen radical scavenger. There is just so many tannins available on the market with so many different sources that this study is very interesting. Here on the study, we see that basically the octannins are the best to consume fast oxygen. They are the most reactive with oxygen radical, but also octannins are great to buffer redox potential. When I talk about buffer redox potential, what I mean is basically make a redox potential, make a wine that has a little bit more room to play before going towards oxidation or reduction. So octannins give this ability to the wine to resist to slight changes and not fall into reduction or oxidation very quickly. So with this study, we actually did our own test with our own tannins, and we got pretty much the same result, that our octannins are the one that consume oxygen the fastest. Here we have the Tannessence forte, which is a toasted oak tannin that is actually the most reactive with oxygen radical. And then we have Tannessence volume, which is untoasted oak tannin that is also very reactive with oxygen radicals. We end up recommending to use Tannessence volume, not forte, because the forte is also an aromatic tannin that will give some toasted oak notes to the wine and some structure. So to avoid this, because the idea here is really to maintain and protect your wine, preserve the quality, it's not to change the wine. We are working with a more neutral tannin. Tannessence volume is untoasted oak tannin that we recommend that any racking transfer movement to use 0.5 to 1 gram per hectoliter, so very low dosage that will not impact the aromatic profile of the wine. If it does give something, it's actually contributing to a little bit of volume and giving some weight in the mid palate. I know many of you that are connected today already apply this strategy of using Tannessence volume at any racking, transfer, or movement. So if you want, please feel free to write your feedback in the chat and share your experience with using Tannessence volume during movement of the wine. It's a great strategy that really helps buffering the wine, making the wine stronger to any change of condition, but also scavenging radicals, so protecting the wine from oxidation. Last step is about improving resistance to oxidation. As we saw in the first graph, glutathione is a great tool for this. So glutathione will trap the quinone and stop the reaction there. We cannot add glutathione like this in wine, but we can add yeast derivates rich in sulfur peptides, so in glutathione. Lamotabier developed Aroma Protect, which is one of the most concentrated yeast derivatives in glutathione that you can find on the market. So you have the composition on the screen here, where actually more than half of the composition of this product is glutathione. It's not gonna give any nutrients to the yeast. It's really here to give antioxidant protection. So we give glutathione to the wine that will be released and catch any quinone that you may produce during aging. Usually the addition is made end of fermentation, but can be also done during aging from 10 to 30 grams per hectoliters. All depends on the variety we are talking about, the type of aging, and also how long. It happened that Aroma Protect has been very commonly used in red, whites, and rosé as an alternative to sulfur to protect the wine and maintain freshness. But also when you do have to delay your bottling and your blend is ready, all the wines are ready in a tank, and you have to leave this tank sit for a few months because your bottling date has been delayed. This is a great tool to really not change anything about the wine, but preserve the antioxidant quality when you can't really add more sulfur or you don't want to do anything to the wine to change the profile. Some results here to show you how it works. So you have two graphs, one 3 months after the addition of Aroma Protect and one 6 months after. On the first graph here, so you can see we added Aroma Protect at the end of fermentation here. 3 months after, the control lost from 76 to 100% of its thiolic expression. So it's thiolic compounds. So there is really not much left in terms of aromas in the wine. The Aroma Protect, on the other side, maintain completely the aromatic profile of the wine, while in 3 months we lost from about 4% of the thiolic compound. So not much. The wine is exactly the same than 3 months ago. If we look at the second graph, another trial, another wine, this is 6 months after the addition, 6 months after the alcoholic fermentation. And we are looking here at the diminution in aromas. You can see that the control lost from 55 to 75% of its thiol, depending which molecule we are looking at, while the Aroma Protect lost from 20 to 30% of its thiol in 6 months. So you can see that really Aroma Protect is a great tool to increase the natural antioxidant protection of the wine without contributing to any aromas or anything in terms of wine organoleptic profile, and it elongates the wine shelf life. In tank, in barrel, but also on the bottle when it sits on the shelf. So just a quick conclusion in terms of oxidation before I go into the second challenge, that is actually microbial control. Two ways we can prevent oxidation. Of course, cellar practices are very important. Limiting dissolved oxygen is essential to prevent oxidation, but also working early in the process to remove precursors of oxidation in whites and rosé can be a great tool. Using polymix nature in this case is highly recommended. You can use sulfur. We at La Motabie offer effervescent sulfur tablets, so from 2 grams and 5 grams. These tablets are just a little tab that you put into the barrel of the tank. It's gonna be effervescent, fizzing, self-dissolving, and you have a safe, quick, and accurate dosage of sulfur without too much time spent in the preparation of sulfur. And then you can use the tan essence volume at any movement of the wine. So this is gonna help you scavenge oxygen radical if you do dissolve oxygen, but also it's gonna help buffer the redox potential, which this works in a longer term to build up the wine resistance to oxidation. In the category of wine resistance to oxidation, the Aroma Protect come in as well, where it does enhance the antioxidant resistance of the wine. So these two last products are really about a longer term where we are adding something that build up the wine resistance toward oxidation or reduction too. Okay, so now I'm gonna go on the next step, which is talking about microbial control. So managing microbes is actually, you will see, a little bit related to oxygenation as well, because microbes love to live in higher redox potential and with oxygen, dissolved oxygen presence because they use it as a food. But today we're gonna talk about different microbes because we take a big risk during aging. We have the risk of development of Retinomyces, but also Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, Enococcus, the lactic acid bacteria, especially if we didn't do malolactic, Acetobacter, acetic acid bacteria, and some non-Saccharomyces yeast that could re-ferment in bottle. Okay, so that's the first things to do is really working on prevention. So working early in the process, of course, avoiding any, try to limit the favorable condition. So in terms of cellar wine condition, so of course, starting with having a low temperature cellar, low pH, reduce the dissolved oxygen that can be used as a food, and lower redox potential. So that's related to what we talked about previously. And I didn't write it here, but avoid stack fermentation and good management of your fermentation before will help controlling microbes in aging. Then we can reduce substrate. That's also a work that we can do early on, and that's highly related to the yeast you choose and the enzyme you choose and how you do your nutrients. So there is some yeast and some enzyme that has the ability to produce precursors for Brettanomyces to do volatile phenol. So avoiding this will help you to have less volatile phenol produced by Brett if you do have a Brettanomyces contamination. Here is a little graph to show you a little bit how it works. But basically we have phenolic acid esterified in the wine. An enzyme that has a cinnamyl esterase activity will transform this into phenolic acids. The phenolic acid is already a precursor for Brettanomyces to be transformed in vinyl phenol and then volatile phenol. But also some yeast that are POF positive. It's a genetic, it's a gene marker. So they have the gene that give us the ability to do the cinnamate decarboxylase. So to transform the phenolic acid into vinyl phenol, giving Brett on a platter a substrate for volatile phenol. All our yeast at La Montabier that we have in in North America are POF negative, so they don't have this ability to do vinyl phenols. All our enzymes that we sell in North America are free of cinnamyl esterase activity, so they don't have this ability to make phenolic acid. So you reduce the substrate here to bread. The last thing is no late addition of nutrients, so you reduce nutrients availability for Retinomyces, but also bacteria, especially if you do some amino acids. Late addition of amino acids could give precursors of biogenic amines to lactobacillus and pediococcus, or anococcus too. So be careful with this. And the last step, which is really about talking about aging now, it's preventing the contamination. So for this, you can, of course, good cellar practices, so hygiene, sanitation, check the lees, taste your lees. Lees can be the best tool ever for a winemaker because it can do great things, but lees can also be the most dangerous tools. That's usually where the concentration of microbes is. And if one is contaminated, you take the risk to contaminate everything and fast. Your topping wine, also source number one of contamination. Often the topping wine is actually the wine that we care the less. It's in a keg, we don't look at it. And in fact, it's the wine we should care the most because we are actually putting this wine in all our barrels. So this wine can be the source of contamination. Be focused on your topping wine. Racking gross lees will help reducing the overall microbes, and I'm going to show you an example just after, and then using antimicrobial agents. So, just told you, racking the lees will help reducing the overall population of microbes. You see here, we are looking at Retinomyces colonies with no fining. The wine is, you see the Petri dish is covered of Retinomyces colonies. We have a lot of contamination. Here we did just a slight fining with gelatin and with a rack, followed by a racking. And it could be anything, it doesn't have to be gelatin. But the fact to do a fining, put clarification basically, put the lees down, we rack from the lees and we are reducing a lot the population of microbes. So fining clarification followed by a racking will help reducing microbial overall loads, but also by doing this, it's gonna help you lower your antimicrobial agent dosage and have a better efficiency of your antimicrobial agent. Okay, so fining is again an essential step to control microbes. Talking about antimicrobial agents, this is all we have available in winemaking. Sulfur. You know about sulfur. Sulfur is a very commonly used antimicrobial agent. When we talk effective antimicrobial agents, we talk molecular sulfur. Molecular sulfur depends on pH. So if we're talking high pH wines, sulfur is not an option to control microbes. Lysozyme. Lysozyme is a protein coming from egg white. Lysozyme is very efficient on against lactic acid bacteria, Pediococcus, Anococcus, Lactobacillus. Lysozyme has some side effects. First, it is an allergen compound, but also it's a protein, so it does create protein haze in white and rosé, so you need to use bentonite if you use lysozyme. And on red, we lose color because it's a protein that reacts with phenolic compounds. So it's getting less and less used, I would say. Then chitosan. Chitosan is it's a polysaccharide, vegan, allergen-free, that has a wide spectrum antimicrobial activity. So it will remove Brettanomyces, Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, Anococcus, Acetobacter, and some non-Saccharomyces. So we will focus on chitosan today because it is the antimicrobial agent that has a wider spectrum that can be applied in any wine without side effects. DMDC and sorbates, are used for managing yeast, and usually more pre-bottling agents. The MDC is Velcorin. It works very good on removing or killing yeast, especially Retinomyces. It will require a specific technician that comes with a specific machine to treat your wine. Sorbate, you can add sorbate just pre-bottling. Just be careful, there is no more bacteria in the wine, because if there is, bacteria can use sorbate and produce geranium taint. Okay, so be careful with these two, but they are really focusing on yeast. During aging, we are talking chitosan. Chitosan, so it's a polysaccharide that is derived from Aspergillus niger. Vegan, allergen-free, biodegradable fining agents. It's not soluble in wine. It's gonna settle down. It has a wide spectrum antimicrobial activities. How does it work? First, there is a charge attraction. Chitosan is positively charged, as you can see in the graph, the molecule here. And most of the microbes have negatively charged residue around their cells. So it's going to be attracted as a magnet, as you can see in this electronic microscope picture. You have the chitosan that looks like a sponge, Retinomyces cells that are attached to it. Then chitosan is going to start its work. It's going to alter the cell metabolism, first by blocking all the receptors around the cells. So the cells can't communicate with outside, the cells can't take nutrients, the cells can't do anything. Second, chitosan is going to perforate the cytoplasmic membrane of the cells. As you can see in the second electronic microscope picture, so here we have the wine with the cells that are full, and the wine has no chitosan here. The cells are perfect. Next to it, we have the picture of the wine treated after 1 day after the chitosan is added. And you can see that already the cells start to leak. You see all this black thing around. That's the inside of the cell that is coming out. 4 days after, we still see the cell here, but barely. And there is as much outside and inside the cell content. 8 days after, there is no more cells, only pieces of the cells. So chitosan is gonna block metabolism, it's gonna kill the microbe, but also it's gonna settle them down. So it is a very multi-action, I would say, antimicrobial agent that can work with many microbes, but it kills them and it cleans them from the wine. So the settling is very important. What we offer at La Motabier is called Kilbret. It's 100% chitosan. It's offering a very efficient treatment because we are at 100% chitosan, so we can work at very low dosage, so we can limit the impact on organoleptic profile of the wine. That's the idea behind it. Working at low dosage, so we don't fine too much the wine. Still a fining agent, so any chitosan will be. So you could always have some other effects, but not at low dosage. The prevention, that's what we recommend. Use 2 to 4 grams per hectoliters post-malolactic. Be careful, don't use it during, because it will kill Enococcus and stop the malolactic. But post-malolactic, you can add it usually after a racking post-malo, so we reduce a little bit the population. We put 2 to 4 grams per hectoliters, and your wine is going to be protected for 4 months. Curative, if we know we have a contamination, so usually same thing, we're going to do a fining. We are going to try to clarify, rack off the lees, add 6 to 8 grams per hectoliters of Kilbret, let it settle for a few days, rack off the lees again, and then add 2 grams per hectoliters for protection that will maintain a protection for 4 months. Okay, so even if it's called Kilbret, it's not working only on Retinomyces, but also on lactic acid bacteria, acetic acid bacteria, and some other non-Saccharomyces yeast. So I'm going to show you some results now. First on Retinomyces. So here, this graph is actually giving 2 information. We are looking at the treatment of Kilbret, and we are looking at the effect on stirring the lees during aging. So the blue line is the population of Bret, the purple dot is the concentration of 4EP, 4EG. You can see that when we stir the control, we actually have an increase of Retinomyces cells, and we also have an increase of 4EP, 4EG because we resuspend the cells. Some of them are alive. We also resuspend a lot of nutrients for Retinomyces to be active. Then we treat the control with Kilbret, 4 grams per hectoliter. There is no more cells alive. And we reduced a little bit. We went from 40 to 20. So we reduced half the 4EP, 4EG present in the wine, just by a finding action. If we do the Kilbret 4 grams per hectoliter with stirring, we see that we get a little bit more Bret population. We pick up some Bret here that are showing alive right now, but we didn't change the 4EP, 4EG population, which means that we, even if the Brets are alive, they are not active. There is no metabolism there. Okay, so Kilbret did his job on killing the Retinomyces and stopping their metabolism. Next graph is showing a trial where we compare sulfur versus Kilbret. So here the blue line is the population of lactic acid bacteria when we maintain 30 milligrams per liter of free sulfur, and the yellow line is with no sulfur at all, just using 4 grams per hectoliter of Kilbret. And you can see that basically we can completely replace sulfur with Kilbret to control lactic acid bacteria in wine. The last graph is actually very interesting. It's looking at acetic acid bacteria. And so basically same trial. So we were comparing sulfur versus Kilbret. You can see that from March to June, so the first 3 months, the sulfur and the Kilbret didn't do so much a good job in controlling bacteria because we had an increase in population, because we increased the temperature of the cellar and we picked up some dissolved oxygen. So when we realized this, we added Tannescence volume and aroma protect that we talked about previously. These two compounds scavenged the oxygen radical, reduced the redox potential and stabilized it. Put down the population of acetic acid bacteria that need some dissolved oxygen and a higher redox potential to survive. And at this point, that's where we see the efficiency of the Kilbret, that the acetic acid bacteria stay going down and start to die, while with the sulfur protection is not enough to maintain a good protection against acetic acid bacteria. So Kilbret is really a very versatile and wide spectrum antimicrobial. You can use it at low dosage in preventive or curative. You can use it instead of sulfur. You can use it to stop the metabolism of Retinomyces, to remove lactic acid bacteria and to remove acetic acid bacteria without any side effect on the wine. So to conclude the presentation of today, so basically to really protect and preserve your wine during aging, there is 2 big families of reactions, or 2 big challenges you want to consider. One is preserving from oxidation. You can preserve from dissolved oxygen, but also build up your wine resistance to oxidation. And then you want to prevent microbial spoilage. So of course, good cellar practices are essential. Use inert gas, reduce the dissolved oxygen, low temperature, low pH, hygiene and sanitation. But also using aroma protect will help you building up wine resistance to oxidation. Tannescence volume is at any movement of the wine. It's gonna scavenge oxygen radical, but also buffer your redox potential, building up again this wine resistance to oxidation. Sulfur is a very versatile tool you can use for oxidation and microbial spoilage. And then Kilbret is your best friend in terms of microbial control. Okay, so with these 4 products, you're pretty covered. Of course, we talked also about alternative to cold for tartrate stabilization and finding with polymix nature that will help microbial sporage, and also oxidation.